Imagine standing alone in the pitch dark.
Right.
You are in an unfamiliar space, like maybe the echoing basement of an abandoned building or a dense, ancient forest far beyond the glow of city
The
lights.
total isolation.
Exactly. The air drops in temperature. The
Mm.
silence is absolute, almost heavy. And then you hear it.
A scrape against the concrete.
Yes, a subtle shift in the dry leaves. A sound that just shouldn't be there. And instantly, your pupils dilate, your heart rate spikes, pumping adrenaline into your bloodstream because your evolutionary biology is screaming at you that you are no longer alone.
Yeah, that primal fear response.
Right. What is lurking in the dark with you? Across every single culture, on every continent, in every era of human history, we have given that unseen shadow a name.
We call them evil spirits.
We call them monsters. We call them demons. But if we look past, the horror movies and the Halloween costumes, a much more profound question emerges. What if these entities aren't just literal monsters waiting to drag us into the abyss?
Which is how pop culture usually frames them.
Right, exactly. What if, when we deeply analyze the ancient lore, demons serve as the ultimate dark mirror of the divine, like a highly sophisticated, terrifying reflection of humanity's deepest inner struggles and societal anxieties?
I mean, that premise fundamentally shifts how we read history.
It really does.
When you strip away the modern cinematic tropes,
Yeah.
The spinning heads and the pea soup, the ancient and medieval texts actually present a highly complex, almost diagnostic mapping of human morality.
Yes.
The supernatural isn't just a collection of ghost stories. It operates as a canvas for our very natural, very human terrors. We basically invented an entire metaphysical architecture to explain the entropy and corruption we saw within ourselves.
And that architecture is exactly what we are mapping out today. We are pulling from an immense stack of historical and religious sources for this deep dive.
A massive stack.
Yeah, we have the Hebrew Bible, the apocryphal Book of Enoch, the Quran, deep explorations of Islamic eschatology, and centuries of historical folklore, stretching all the way into bizarre medieval and Renaissance grimoires like the Ars Goetia.
Which gets incredibly weird, as we'll see later.
Oh, so weird. So the mission for this deep dive is to trace the evolution of demons and hell lore across the major monotheistic traditions: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
Right.
We're going to decode what these entities truly represent and explore the mechanisms humanity has used to categorize and thereby attempt to control pure chaos.
And our approach here relies entirely on analytical distance.
Naturally.
We are evaluating these religious and occult texts impartially. We're treating them as vital, historical, and philosophical windows into the human condition.
We aren't taking theological sides here.
Exactly. The objective is to examine how different civilizations, separated by centuries and geography, attempted to reconcile the existence of an ordered, benevolent universe with the undeniable daily reality of evil and suffering.
So we are getting into the spooky, shadowy side of human history, but we are skipping the basic Sunday school summaries.
Right, we're going deeper.
Yeah, for anyone listening who already knows the basic beats of these traditions, we want to look at the mechanics behind the myths. Where does the actual concept, like the very definition of a demon, originate before monotheism takes over the narrative?
Well, to find the mechanical origin, we have to look at the linguistic roots.
Okay.
The English word demon derives from the ancient Greek word daemon.
Daemon, right.
And in classical antiquity, a daemon was not an inherently malevolent entity. It was an entirely morally neutral concept.
Really? So not evil at all?
Not at all. It simply meant a lesser god, a guiding spirit, or the personification of a natural force. For instance, Socrates famously claimed to have a personal daemon.
Wait, Socrates had a demon?
Well, a daemon, it was a kind of inner voice or spirit that never told him what to do, but would warn him against making bad decisions.
Oh, wow. So in the classical Greek worldview, a daemon is almost like an environmental spirit or an abstract concept given a face. It's the spirit of a specific river, or the personification of sudden inspiration. It isn't a creature with red skin and bat wings actively trying to harvest human souls.
Far from it. They were explanatory mechanisms for the unpredictable forces of nature and for the sudden, inexplicable shifts in human fortune.
Makes sense.
If a localized storm destroyed your crops, it was the work of a localized daemon. But this entire ecological system of spirits undergoes a radical foundational shift with the rise of Abrahamic monotheism.
Because suddenly there's only one God.
Exactly. The transition from a polytheistic worldview, which easily accommodates thousands of localized spirits, to a rigid worldview insisting on one singular, omnipotent creator that creates a massive theological dilemma.
The dilemma of what to do with everybody else's gods.
Precisely.
You have neighboring tribes, rival empires, all worshiping their own pantheons. A monotheistic framework can't always just wave a hand and say those entities are entirely fictional because the cultural fear and reverence for them is too deeply entrenched in the region, right?
Yeah, you can't just erase them overnight.
Yeah.
So the sociological mechanism employed here is absorption through demonization.
Demonization.
The deities of rival nations are systematically demoted, they are stripped of their divine status, and recategorized as malevolent spirits actively opposing the one true God.
And the sources provide a masterclass in this kind of theological warfare with the Canaanite god, Baal-Zebul.
Oh, the Baal-Zebul example is perfect.
It's one of the most fascinating linguistic weaponizations in history because in the ancient Middle East, Baal-Zebul translates roughly to Lord of the High House or Lord of the Earth.
He was a very big deal.
Yeah, a major, highly respected deity associated with rain, fertility, and the flourishing of the environment.
Yet the ancient Hebrew text deliberately altered the pronunciation of his name by a fraction.
Right.
They changed Baal-Zebul to Beelzebub.
Beelzebub.
And that minor phonetic shift changes the meaning from Lord of the High House to Lord of the Flies.
That is just...
It is a profound act of theological mockery. They took a neighboring civilization's supreme god of life and fertility and turned him into a symbol of decay, pestilence, and rotting garbage attracting flies.
Wow.
This linguistic rebranding becomes the blueprint for how monotheism establishes its borders.
The old gods are forced into the new basement.
Exactly.
But as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam mature and establish their own unique theological borders, they don't just share a single definition of what these dark entities are, do they?
No, they develop entirely different structural anatomies for the demonic.
So let's break those down. In Christianity, the dominant, almost exclusive framework is the fallen angel.
Right. The Christian ontology of demons is heavily rooted in the concept of corrupted perfection. Angels are understood to be pure spiritual beings created by God before the physical universe.
And crucially, they were imbued with free will.
Yes, that's the key. The narrative posits that a faction of these angels, led by a figure often identified as Lucifer, utilized that free will to orchestrate a rebellion against the divine order.
And upon their defeat, they are cast out of the heavenly realm.
Exactly. So the Christian demon is therefore an inherently tragic figure. It is a majestic, intellectually superior being that willfully corrupted itself and now operates out of sheer malice and spite to corrupt humanity, God's favored creation.
See, I struggle a bit with the idea that an intellect that vast a being that literally stands in the presence of the absolute would think a rebellion is a winnable scenario.
It is a paradox, yes.
It implies a blinding level of irrationality. But before we dig into that specific flaw, we have to look at the Jewish texts, because early Judaism presents a much more diverse, almost chaotic landscape of spirits before the fallen angel concept completely monopolized the narrative.
Yeah, early Jewish lore reflects the geographical and cultural crossroads of the ancient Near East. The texts mention entities like the Shiddim.
The Shiddim.
The term likely originates from the Akkadian word Shiddu, which actually referred to protective spirits in Mesopotamian culture.
Oh, interesting. Another flip.
Right, because in the biblical context, Shiddim are associated with foreign idols and unauthorized sacrifices.
Right.
You also have the Serum.
The hairy demons.
Exactly. It translates directly to hairy ones or hairy demons. They're often conceptualized as satyr-like creatures that haunt desolate ruins and the edges of the wilderness.
So they represent the untamed spaces, the things that live beyond the light of the campfire.
Precisely.
And we absolutely cannot discuss early Jewish folklore without analyzing Lilith, because her evolution is just staggering.
It really is one of the most complex mythological arcs.
The sources trace her roots all the way back to ancient Sumerian mythology, where the Lilitu were predatory wind or air spirits. But by the time we get to the Hebrew Bible, she receives a very brief, eerie mention in the book of Isaiah. She's described as a night creature or a screech owl, making her home in the desolate, burning ruins of a fallen city.
Lilith's trajectory is a prime example of how folklore metabolizes societal anxieties. Well, over the centuries, particularly in medieval Jewish mystical texts like the Alphabet of Sirach, she is retroactively written into the Genesis narrative.
Oh, right, the first wife of Adam's story.
Exactly. The folklore frames her as Adam's first wife, created from the exact same earth as he was rather than from his rib. Because she viewed herself as his equal, she refused to submit to his authority. She uttered the ineffable name of God and fled the Garden of Eden.
Wow, so she becomes the ultimate shadow self of patriarchal society.
That's exactly what she represents.
She transforms into the mother of monsters, a creature who stalks the night and steals infants. She's the personification of everything a highly structured, male-dominated ancient society feared about female independence and untamed sexuality.
Which brings us to the Islamic paradigm, which introduces an entirely unique ontological category, the jinn.
Great, the jinn. Let's unpack that.
To grasp the significance of the jinn, we have to understand the Islamic taxonomy of intelligent life. Islamic theology identifies three distinct intelligent creations. Angels are created from nur, or pure light. However, contrary to the Christian narrative, angels in mainstream Islamic thought do not possess free will.
Wait, really? No free will at all?
None. They are fundamentally incapable of disobeying God. Their entire existence is a state of perpetual obedience and worship.
The implications of that are massive. Because if angels do not possess free will, then by definition, an angel cannot rebel.
Correct.
Which completely eliminates the concept of a fallen angel from the Islamic framework. So what is the source of demonic activity?
The jinn. The Quran explicitly states that while humans were fashioned from clay, the jinn were created from a smokeless flame of fire.
Smokeless fire, that's such a vivid image.
It is. They exist in El-Haib, the unseen realm, occupying a dimension parallel to ours. And crucially, like humans, the jinn are endowed with free will.
Ah, so they can choose.
Yes, they have societies, they eat, they reproduce, they die, and they face ultimate judgment. Because they have free will, a jinn can be righteous, neutral, or malevolent.
Okay, so they aren't just automatically demons?
Exactly. The specific subset of jinn who actively choose to embrace evil and misguide humanity are classified as the shayatin, or devils.
The biological mirroring is incredible. It's not just a binary of good angels in the clouds and bad demons in a pit. It's a complete, unseen ecosystem living right alongside us.
Right.
But this structural difference forces a huge question about the ultimate villain in these stories. If the Christian Satan is a fallen angel and Islamic angels cannot fall, how does Islam explain its version of Satan?
The Islamic figure corresponding to Satan is named Iblis.
Okay.
And the Quran addresses his origin directly, explicitly stating that Iblis was not an angel but was one of the jinn.
Okay.
Because of his intense devotion and piety, he had been elevated to the company of the angels.
So he earned his way into the highest ranks through merit, but his fundamental nature was still fire, not light. He still had the capacity to choose.
Correct. The cosmic schism occurs when God creates Adam from clay and commands all the celestial beings to prostrate themselves before this new creation. The angels, devoid of free will, obey instantly. Iblis, possessing free will, refuses. When questioned by God, his justification is purely hierarchical and elemental. He says, I am better than him. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay.
It is the ultimate statement of superiority.
It is absolute arrogance. Notice that Iblis does not wage a literal war in heaven. He's expelled for a singular act of insubordination.
Just refusing to bow.
Yes. Yet despite the vast structural differences between the Christian narrative of a fallen angel and the Islamic narrative of a rebellious jinn, both traditions isolate the exact same psychological catalyst for the origin of ultimate evil.
The catalyst is pride.
It is the belief that the self is superior to the Creator's design. Lucifer's supposed desire to ascend to the throne of God and Iblis's refusal to bow to a creature of mud are manifestations of the exact same flaw.
This is a profound philosophical anchor. These ancient cultures are essentially arguing that evil does not begin with an act of violence. It doesn't begin with murder or theft. It begins internally with ego. It begins with the narcissistic conviction that you are fundamentally better, more deserving, or more evolved than the people around you. They wrapped a massive psychological truth inside a supernatural origin story.
And this theme of celestial entities overstepping their boundaries and corrupting the natural order reaches its absolute zenith in one of the most elaborate and visceral narratives in the ancient world.
Oh, yeah.
To fully explore the architecture of the demonic, we have to examine the apocryphal rebellion of the Watchers.
The prequel to the Great Flood.
Yes.
We are talking about the Book of Enoch. And the context here is vital because this text was massively influential during the Second Temple period of Judaism, which is roughly around the 3rd to 1st centuries BCE.
It was incredibly popular.
Yeah. It didn't make it into the final canonical Bible for most Jewish and Christian traditions, though the Ethiopian Orthodox Church still holds it as canon. which is interesting, but it heavily influenced the writers of the New Testament. The story revolves around an elite order of angels known as the Watchers.
The Aramaic term used in the ancient texts is iron, which translates to those who are awake or those who watch.
Okay.
According to the Enochian narrative, a detachment of 200 of these watchers was originally dispatched to the earthly realm by God. Their mandate was strictly observational and protective. They were meant to be silent guardians over early humanity.
But the prime directive gets broken.
Spectacularly broken.
The text details how these 200 celestial beings, led by a commander named Samyaza, look upon the daughters of men and are overwhelmed by physical lust.
Right.
They want to cross the boundary between spirit and flesh, but Samyaza hesitates. He understands the cosmic weight of what they are about to do. He tells his subordinates that he fears they will lose their nerve at the last minute, leaving him to bear the entirety of divine punishment alone.
So to prevent desertion, they establish a treasonous pact. They gather on the summit of Mount Hermon, which is a real geographical location, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yes. And they bind themselves together through mutual curses and oaths. They agree to descend, take human wives, and act on their forbidden desires as a unified front, entirely abandoning their celestial stations.
It is a deliberate, calculated invasion of the physical realm.
It is.
But the lust for human women is only half the crime. The true catastrophe is initiated by a watcher named Azazel. Because when Azazel falls, he brings highly guarded, forbidden celestial knowledge down to earth.
And the texts are incredibly specific about the curriculum he teaches humanity, and it completely reframes the narrative.
The specific knowledge imparted by Azazel is the key to decoding the text's deeper societal critique, right? What elements of his teachings stand out when you analyze the sources?
Well, he teaches humanity metallurgy, but not for farming tools. He specifically teaches men how to forge swords, knives, shields, and breastplates.
Wow.
He introduces the industrial art of war.
And he didn't stop there.
No. Simultaneously, he teaches women the art of cosmetics, the making of mirrors, the use of antimony to beautify the eyelids, and the wearing of precious stones and dyes. He also introduces sorcery, enchantments, and the reading of the stars.
So consider the thematic duality of that forbidden knowledge. Azazel provides humanity with the technologies of extreme violence and extreme vanity.
Oh, yes.
He teaches a primitive species how to butcher one another with unprecedented efficiency and how to alter their physical appearance to manipulate, seduce, and deceive.
Right.
Now, I have to challenge the moral framework of this text, because if you look at this through a modern or even a classical Greek lens, Azazel sounds exactly like Prometheus.
That's a common comparison.
Yeah, Prometheus stole fire from the Olympian gods and gave it to humanity to jumpstart civilization, and we view him as a tragic hero. Weren't the Watchers just acting like rogue science teachers, giving humanity the tools required to build empires, create art, and defend themselves? Why does the Enochian author frame the acceleration of human civilization as a cosmic crime?
Because you are reading it through the lens of Western progress, where technological advancement is inherently viewed as a moral good.
Okay, fair.
To understand the Book of Enoch, you must understand the historical context of the authors during the Second Temple period. Jewish society was dealing with the brutal realities of Hellenistic empire building. They were being crushed by the massive technologically advanced armies of the Ptolemies and the Seleucids.
Ah, so the shiny breastplates and swords aren't just abstract concepts, they're the literal weapons of their oppressors.
Precisely. The Enochian worldview posits that human civilization wasn't organically developed, it was a demonic pollutant.
Wow.
Azazel didn't empower humanity. He foisted advanced tools of destruction onto a species that lacked the moral maturity to handle them. By bypassing the natural evolution of human wisdom and handing them swords and vanity, the Watchers effectively fast-tracked humanity's self-destruction.
And that self-destruction manifests in a horrifying physical way through the offspring of the Watchers and human women. They birth a hybrid race known as the Nephilim.
The giants?
Yeah. When we read the source material describing what these creatures actually do to the earth, it reads like ancient survival horror.
The imagery is visceral, and it's deeply symbolic of unchecked imperial consumption.
The texts describe the Nephilim as giants of immense stature with insatiable appetites. Initially, they consume all the agricultural yields, everything humanity has worked to cultivate.
Right, they strip the fields bare.
And once the crops are depleted, the giants turn their hunger toward the animal kingdom, devouring the beasts, the birds, and the fish. When the animals are gone, they cross the ultimate taboo and begin devouring humanity itself.
It gets worse.
Yeah. Finally, when the earth is entirely stripped bare, the giants turn on one another, consuming each other's flesh and drinking the blood. It is an image of total entropic gluttony.
The Nephilim are the apex predators of a corrupted ecosystem. The text states that the earth itself cried out against the violence. And this, according to the Enochian tradition, is the actual catalyst for the Great Flood.
Not just that people were being bad.
Right. God does not unleash the deluge simply because humans are morally failing. The flood is an emergency planetary reset. It is a necessary sterilization process to eradicate the cannibalistic Nephilim, wash the earth of the blood they spilled, and halt the proliferation of Azazel's weaponized technology.
That is incredibly intense. And what is the fate of the Watchers who started this chain reaction?
The divine retribution is absolute. Samyaza and his core followers are bound by the Archangel Michael and forced to witness the mutual slaughter of their giant children.
Ouch.
Following this psychological torture, they are imprisoned in the subterranean dark valleys of the earth for 70 generations. Azazel receives a specific punishment. The Archangel Raphael binds him hand and foot, casts him into a pit of sharp, jagged rocks in a desolate desert, and covers him in total darkness, where he is to remain until the final day of judgment.
They are chained in the dark depths of the earth, and there's a fascinating epilogue to the Nephilim too. The text asserts that because the giants were hybrid creatures, part spirit, part flesh, when their physical bodies drowned in the flood, their spirits did not ascend to heaven, nor did they descend to the afterlife.
They were trapped.
Trapped in the physical realm. They became the disembodied, wandering evil spirits that plague humanity. That is the specific Enochian origin of demons. They are the restless, hungry ghosts of cannibal giants.
It is a drastically different origin story than the rebellious angels in heaven motif that dominates later Christian theology.
Totally different.
However, notice the architectural precedent this story sets. The Watchers are punished by being bound in dark pits beneath the earth. This idea that the deep, subterranean spaces are designated prisons for rebellious cosmic forces establishes the foundational geography for our next area of exploration.
The architecture of damnation, the mapping of hell.
Exactly.
Let's trace that evolution because the concept of hell requires a massive philosophical leap. If we look at the earliest layers of Judaism, the afterlife is actually remarkably mundane.
It really is.
You have the concept of Sheol, which is essentially a dim, silent, neutral waiting room. It is the cistern of sound where all the dead reside. Kings, peasants, the righteous, the wicked, they all go to Sheol.
Right.
There isn't a fiery torture chamber for the bad guys and a cloud for the good guys. It's just the finality of the grave.
The theological shift from a neutral communal underworld to an active, stratified place of fiery retribution is one of the most significant developments in human religious thought.
How does that happen?
It occurs as the concept of divine justice evolves. If a ruthless tyrant and a benevolent peacemaker both end up sleeping in the same dusty silence of Sheol, where is the ultimate justice?
Right. Where's the reckoning?
The demand for moral equilibrium necessitates a mechanism of specific retribution. We see this shift materialize with the emergence of the concept of Gehenna.
The demand for justice is what births hell. And Gehenna isn't an abstract metaphysical concept when it first appears. It has a literal topographical origin point.
Yes. Etymologically, Gehenna is derived from Gai Hinnom, the Valley of Hinnom, which is a very real, steep gorge located just outside the ancient walls of Jerusalem.
A real place.
Historically, this specific valley carried a dark, horrific legacy. During the reigns of certain idolatrous kings of Judah, it was the site of pagan rituals involving child sacrifice by fire to the deity Molech.
Horrifying.
After religious reforms outlawed these practices, the valley was deliberately desecrated.
It was repurposed as a burning garbage dump for the city. It became a repository for refuse, animal carcasses, and the unburied bodies of executed criminals. And to prevent disease, fires were kept burning constantly.
So consider the sensory impact of that location.
Yeah.
If you lived in ancient Jerusalem, you could look over the wall and see the perpetual smoke.
Yeah.
You could smell the burning flesh and the decay. It was a place of literal, unending fire and corruption. So when ancient prophets sought to articulate the concept of ultimate divine punishment, they didn't need to invent a fiery realm from scratch.
Pointed over the wall.
Exactly. They used the Valley of Hinnom as a visceral metaphor. The implication was clear. If you lived a life of wickedness and spiritual decay, your soul's final destination would mirror the burning, rotting refuse of Gehenna.
It was a metaphor that everyone could immediately see and smell. But as the centuries pass, theological scholars aren't satisfied with a simple burning valley. They take that geographic metaphor and expand it into a vast, complex cosmology.
They absolutely do.
And nowhere is the architecture of damnation more intricate, terrifying, and structured than in Islamic eschatology.
Islamic tradition provides a highly systematized mapping of hell, known as Jahannam. It is not conceptualized as a single chaotic lake of fire. It is an inverted, highly ordered realm.
Highly ordered.
It is traditionally described as having 7 distinct levels, or gates, descending deeper into the abyss. Crucially, each level is custom-tailored to punish a specific category of transgression.
That stratification is fascinating. It reflects a deep, almost legalistic anxiety about proportionality and justice.
Yes, exactly.
The underlying logic is that a minor thief or a hypocrite should not experience the exact same torments as a mass murderer. The punishment must perfectly align with the nature of the crime. Let's walk through the architecture of these 7 levels because the imagery in the sources is intense.
The uppermost level, which is ironically the lightest punishment, is often referred to simply as Jahannam. According to traditional interpretations, this level serves as a temporary purgation for sinful monotheists.
Meaning?
Individuals who believed in God but committed major sins they did not repent for in life. The torment described involves the faces being burned and the skins being continuously destroyed and renewed, ensuring the sensory experience of pain is never dulled.
And that is the lightest sentence.
Yeah.
As we descend the inverted ziggurat, the sins become more systemic. The third level, Sakar, is particularly striking. The sources indicate this level is designated for those who neglected their daily prayers and, crucially, those who refused to feed the poor. The fire of Sakar is characterized by its ability to scorch and consume the flesh entirely, leaving only the bones, before the flesh is restored to burn again.
Notice the socioeconomic justice embedded within the theology. Neglecting the marginalized and hoarding wealth is viewed not merely as a minor moral failing, but as a severe cosmic crime warranting placement deep within the inferno. The punishment addresses the failure of the individual to uphold their societal obligations.
This thematic punishment becomes even more apparent in the fourth level, Al-Hutama, which translates as the crusher.
The crusher.
This level is reserved for the arrogant, the greedy, and the backbiters who obsessively hoard wealth and slander others. The physical description of this fire is haunting. It doesn't just burn the exterior skin. It is a fire that aggressively seeks out and rises over the hearts, crushing the soul from the inside out.
We must analyze the psychological poetry of that specific punishment. Slander, greed, and arrogance are not physical actions in the same way as theft. They are internal diseases. They are corruptions of the heart. Therefore, the fire of Al-Hutama is designed to attack the heart directly. It is an exact, terrifying symmetry between the nature of the sin and the nature of the retribution.
And it goes all the way down to the 7th and deepest abyss, Alawiyah, the realm of total crushing darkness and the most intense heat. And who occupies the absolute bottom of hell?
This always surprises people.
It isn't murderers, tyrants, or thieves. The deepest pit is explicitly reserved for hypocrites.
Yes.
Those who outwardly pretended to be righteous, faithful members of the community, but were secretly corrupt and disbelieving.
That placement reveals a profound sociological insight. A known enemy, a murderer, or an opposing army can be identified and defended against. The threat is external and visible.
You see them coming.
Exactly. A hypocrite, however, operate from within. They erode the foundational trust required for any community to function. They rot the society from the inside. Because hypocrisy poses the greatest existential threat to communal cohesion, Islamic theology places hypocrites in the absolute lowest depths of damnation.
But there is another element to Jahannam that elevates the terror beyond just structural punishments. Hell isn't merely a location you are sent to. The texts describe it almost as a sentient, living beast.
The personification of hell is a recurring motif. There is a vivid tradition describing the day of judgment, wherein Jahannam will be brought forth physically.
Physically brought forth.
It is depicted as being restrained by 70,000 reins, with each rein held by 70,000 angels. It is an entity that exhales, roars with fury, and actively desires to consume the wicked. A famous Quranic verse describes God asking Jahannam if it is full, and hell hungrily replies, "Are there any more to come?"
It is a hungry apex predator. You aren't just being sentenced to a prison, you are being fed to a cosmic monster.
Yeah.
But running parallel to these vivid, highly physical descriptions of fire and chains is a profound philosophical counter-narrative. And this emerges strongly within Islamic mysticism, particularly the Sufi tradition.
Right. When we examine the works of brilliant medieval scholars like the 12th century mystic Ibn Arabi, the paradigm shifts entirely. Ibn Arabi suggested that the horrific descriptions of fire, boiling water, and chains should not be understood as literal physical realities. He proposed an ontology where hell is fundamentally a psychological and spiritual state of the soul after it separates from the physical body.
Wait, let's unpack the mechanics of that. How does a psychological state equate to burning in fire?
Well, during our earthly existence, humans consistently indulge in illusions. We attach our identities to wealth, status, physical desires, and ego. We prioritize the temporary over the eternal.
Right, we focus on the material world.
When death occurs, the physical senses are stripped away, and those temporary illusions instantly collapse. The soul is suddenly thrust into the raw, unshielded reality of the divine.
And all the things you thought mattered are gone.
Exactly. The soul is left with the agonizing, inescapable realization of its absolute distance from God, a distance it created itself through its earthly choices. In this framework, the fire is not literal combustion. It is the burning friction of immense regret and spiritual starvation. The chains are not iron links. They are the ingrained habits and addictions that bound the soul in life, desires that the soul still craves but can no longer satisfy without a physical body.
Oh, that is brutal.
The torment is not inflicted by external sadistic angels wielding pitchforks. It is generated entirely by the soul's own realization of its self-inflicted alienation.
I have to interject here, because if hell is essentially a state of mind like the ultimate sensory deprivation tank where you are trapped forever with your own worst regrets and unfulfilled addictions, is that actually less scary than a literal fire, or is it infinitely worse?
That's the terrifying question.
From a psychological standpoint, if a demon is torturing me, I have an external enemy to hate. I can endure it. But if the torture is entirely self-generated by my own clarity of my failures, I only have myself to blame. That strips away any defense mechanism.
It forces absolute, radical accountability. It means that humans are actively constructing their own heaven or their own hell in every single moment of their lives through their moral choices. The afterlife is merely the full realization of the state you cultivated while alive.
Yeah.
However, humanity possesses a deep psychological aversion to accepting that level of internal responsibility. We
Right.
find the idea of an internal rot terrifying. We desperately need to externalize our flaws. We need an enemy with a face.
And that profound psychological need to externalize our inner darkness is the exact reason human cultures invented the demonic roster.
Precisely. The famous figures of demonology are not merely a random assortment of monsters. They function as the personification of complex human sins.
Yeah.
They take the abstract concept of a moral failing and give it a name, a personality, and a visual representation.
Let's analyze the VIPs of the underworld, the heavy hitters.
For the main cast.
Yeah. Rather than just reading through a list of names, let's group them by the specific human flaws they embody. Because when you look closely, they operate almost like the ultimate anti-superheroes. Every major demon has a specific origin story, a unique sphere of influence, and a fatal flaw that defines them.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the root of the tree, pride and rebellion.
As we discussed, pride is the foundational sin. The figures of Lucifer and Iblis dominate this category. Lucifer, the light bringer, represents the pinnacle of divine creation. He's the most intellectually gifted, beautiful being in the celestial hierarchy.
But his ego gets in the way.
Yet his vanity blinds him. He cannot accept subservience. Iblis operates on the same frequency. His elemental superiority complex prevents him from acknowledging the value of humanity.
Their superpower is their immense intellect, but their fatal flaw is their blinding ego. They represent the danger of pure rationality stripped of humility.
Well said.
But once that initial rebellion occurs, the dam breaks and the other sins rush in. Let's examine the demons governing greed, gluttony, and chaos.
In the Christian tradition, the concept of greed is ultimately personified by the figure of Mammon.
Mammon.
The biblical assertion that you cannot serve both God and Mammon elevates what was likely an Aramaic term for wealth into a literal demonic entity. Mammon becomes the prince of avarice. He embodies the insidious voice that rationalizes exploitation, prioritizing endless accumulation over moral integrity or human welfare.
Mammon is arguably the most successful demon in the modern era because Human societies actively celebrate the sin he represents. We rebrand endless greed as ambition or fiduciary duty.
That's a very fair modern critique.
Then you have Beelzebub, who we traced back to the Canaanite god earlier. Within the demonic hierarchy, he frequently serves as Satan's direct lieutenant, representing the sin of gluttony. He represents the impulse to consume endlessly, far beyond necessity, until the consumer is corrupted and bloated by their own excess.
And governing the raw, unbridled destruction that follows is Leviathan.
I love it.
The source texts frequently describe Leviathan as a massive, primordial sea serpent, a creature of the untamable abyss. In demonic lore, Leviathan is intrinsically tied to the sin of envy.
Wait, why connect a giant sea monster to envy? What's the psychological mechanism there? Ancient Israel was a hill country nation. They were terrified of the deep ocean, which makes sense. But how does that equate to being jealous of your neighbor?
The connection relies on understanding the nature of envy. True envy is not mere jealousy. It is a chaotic, destructive, almost primal emotion that rises from the deepest, darkest parts of the human subconscious.
Okay.
Envy doesn't just want to acquire the object of desire. Its primary goal is to destroy the person who possesses it. It is a leveling mechanism. Much like a raging, uncontrollable ocean storm, envy threatens to drown the soul and pull everything down into the abyss. Leviathan is the perfect avatar for that overwhelming, destructive surge.
Oh, wow. That is a brilliant mapping of emotion to mythology.
It's very sophisticated.
Now, we must examine the demons associated with lust and mystery, because these figures are profoundly complex. This brings us to Asmodeus.
Asmodeus is fascinating.
The physical description of Asmodeus is wildly surreal. Occult texts describe him as having 3 heads: the head of a man, the head of a bull, and the head of a ram. He possesses the tail of a serpent, breathes fire, and is often depicted riding an infernal dragon.
The visual amalgamation is highly symbolic. The bull and the ram are ancient symbols of aggressive virility and stubbornness. The serpent represents deception and venom.
And what's his role in the texts?
Asmodeus plays a central antagonistic role in the Book of Tobit. That's an apocryphal text where he obsessively murders the successive husbands of a woman named Sarah on their wedding nights before the marriages can be consummated.
Terrifying.
He's the ultimate destroyer of marital bonds and the purveyor of rampant, destructive sexual immorality. Interestingly, later occult traditions also assign him the role of governing gambling houses.
See, the connection between lust and gambling is actually incredibly logical. Both are deeply compulsive, dopamine-driven behaviors. They are addictions centered around chasing an intense, immediate high, regardless of the long-term destructive consequences to one's life or family.
Right.
Asmodeus isn't just the demon of sex, he is the demon of compulsion, and standing alongside him in the realm of seduction is Lilith. We explored her origins earlier, but she evolves into the ultimate symbol of forbidden mystery.
Yes.
She becomes a creature of the night, representing everything that organized patriarchal religion attempts to suppress. Female autonomy, untamed nature, and sexuality severed from procreation.
The overarching mechanism at play with all these entities, Mammon, Leviathan, Asmodeus, Lilith, is the externalization of internal conflict.
That's the theme.
They take the nebulous, exhausting internal battles we face, the desire to gamble, the urge to hoard wealth, the pull of forbidden lust, and provide them with a tangible, localized form.
But why is that necessary? Why do human beings need to visualize a 3-headed monster riding a dragon just to deal with their own bad habits?
Because battling an abstract concept within your own psychology is an isolating, incredibly difficult endeavor. If your narrative is simply, I have a pathological compulsion to gamble, that requires deep introspection and a painful confrontation with your own weakness.
It's just you against you.
Exactly. However, if your narrative is, I am currently under spiritual attack by the demon Asmodeus, the psychological burden shifts. You have an external enemy. You have a target you can fight using established protocols, prayers, amulets, rituals, exorcisms. Giving chaos a physical face and a name is humanity's first desperate step in attempting to control it.
That psychological framework explains so much. It makes the chaos feel manageable.
It does.
But humanity didn't stop at just naming a handful of major princes. As history moves forward into the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the categorization of evil becomes staggeringly complex. People didn't just want a few heavy hitters. They demanded an entire, comprehensive catalog of chaos.
This reflects the human urge to impose structure on the unknown. As European society became highly stratified, built around rigid feudal systems, complex royal courts, and intricate ecclesiastical hierarchies, theologians and occultists intuitively projected those exact same organizational structures onto the underworld.
As above, so below.
Exactly. Hell could no longer be a chaotic pit. It had to operate as a highly efficient, deeply bureaucratic feudal monarchy.
It's the ultimate demonic org chart, and a significant portion of this categorization was structured directly around the seven deadly sins. We see early attempts at this in a 1409 English Lollard tract called the Lantern of Light, but the most famous and influential mapping was codified by a German Jesuit theologian named Peter Binsfeld in 1589.
Right, Binsfeld's list.
Binsfeld created a rigid system pairing a specific prince of hell to each of the seven sins.
And Binsfeld's classification became the standard structural model. He assigned Lucifer to pride, Mammon to greed, Asmodeus to lust, Leviathan to envy, Beelzebub to gluttony, Satan operating distinctly from Lucifer in this specific model to wrath, and Belphegor to sloth.
It provides a perfectly balanced one-to-one ratio of sin to demonic prince. But the occultists and magicians of the Renaissance looked at Binsfeld's neat little list and decided it was vastly inadequate.
It really did.
They dove off the deep end, producing massive grimoires, books of magic, summoning, and spellcraft. And the undisputed king of these texts is the Ars Goetia, the first section of the Lesser Key of Solomon.
The premise of the Ars Goetia relies on the legend that the biblical King Solomon possessed a magical ring that allowed him to command and bind 72 specific demons, forcing them to build the Temple of Jerusalem.
Okay.
The grimoire serves as a manual detailing the names, ranks, seals, and bizarre appearances of these 72 entities.
And the descriptions of these 72 demons are absolutely surreal. They don't sound like terrifying lords of darkness. They sound like entries in a twisted, hallucinogenic zoology textbook.
Let's look at a few.
Yeah, let's examine Baal. He is listed as the first principal spirit, a king who rules in the east, commanding 66 legions of infernal spirits. The text states he appears with 3 heads, a toad, a man, and a cat. And what is his ultimate, terrifying demonic power? He grants the summoner invisibility.
A classic, highly practical desire for a magician or a thief.
Right. And the surrealism continues with figures like Buer. Buer is categorized as a great president of hell. The text specifies he only appears when the sun is in the astrological sign of Sagittarius.
And his visual form is striking.
To say the least, a lion's head positioned in the center, surrounded by 5 goat legs radiating outward like the spokes of a wheel, allowing him to move by rolling in any direction.
A rolling wheel made of a lion and goat legs.
Exactly. And what dark, corrupting knowledge does this president of hell impart? He teaches moral and natural philosophy, logic, and the medicinal virtues of all herbs and plants. He heals distempers in humans.
We have a demon residing in the fiery pits of damnation whose primary function is to teach university-level logic and cure the common cold.
I have to stop and ask, what on earth is going on here? Why does a demon need to teach philosophy? And look at Zagan. Zagan is a great king who manifests as a bull with griffin wings. His demonic power is to make men witty. He can turn water into wine, turn blood into wine, and instantly turn any mundane metal into coins of the realm.
Very useful.
It's like summoning a supernatural venture capitalist whose job is to make you rich and fun at parties. Why did demonic lore devolve into such absurdly specific, seemingly non-threatening utility?
Well, to decode the Ars Goetia, you must analyze the socioeconomic and intellectual climate of the Renaissance. This was an era defined by a profound paradigm shift. European society was obsessed with the recovery of lost classical knowledge, the pursuit of early scientific inquiry, and the practice of alchemy.
Right.
Intellectuals were beginning to push back against the rigid intellectual monopoly of the church. They wanted to understand the mechanics of the natural world.
They were looking for shortcuts. They wanted direct access to the source code of reality.
Precisely. The demons detailed in the Ars Goetia are not the terrifying, soul-devouring monsters depicted in medieval morality plays. They are conceptualized as mechanical tools. They serve as a supernatural catch-all for every illicit human desire and intellectual frustration of the 16th and 17th centuries.
So it's about control.
Yes. Do you lack the decades required to master complex astronomy? Summon a demon who instantly imparts knowledge of the stars. Are you anxious about the massive economic inflation caused by the influx of New World silver? Summon Zagan to turn cheap copper into gold coins.
It completely reframes magic as a transactional science. The summoner isn't worshiping these demons. They are binding them through complex, legalistic rituals and divine names.
Yeah.
They gave the demons aristocratic titles, dukes, marquises, earls, presidents to mimic human nobility, operating on the logic that a supernatural earl must obey superior command just like a human earl would. It is an extraordinary attempt by humanity to master and commodify the unknown.
However, Interacting with the conceptual unknown inevitably forces a confrontation with the self.
Always comes back to the self.
It does. And this brings us to the philosophical climax of our analysis. We've examined the ancient texts, the evolving geography of hell, and the rigid bureaucracies of the occult. But we must return the focus to the human experience.
Yeah.
The ultimate question raised by all these traditions is, are demons external autonomous entities flying through the unseen world? Or are they elaborate reflections of our own internal moral struggles?
That is the crux of the entire deep dive. Why does every single culture, regardless of when or where they existed, feel compelled to create these entities? What do these myths reveal about human morality and the architecture of our fears?
To answer this, we need to look at a deeply unsettling Islamic concept, the Quran.
The Quran. Okay, let's explore that.
The concept of the Quran fundamentally localizes the cosmic battle between good and evil. In Islamic tradition, a Quran, which translates to companion, is assigned to every single human being from birth.
Every person gets one.
Every person. Crucially, this companion is a jinn, specifically a shaitan or devil, whose sole function is to remain with the individual constantly, whispering temptations, sowing doubt, and suggesting evil actions directly into the heart and mind.
It is the literal theological embodiment of having a devil on your shoulder.
Exactly.
If we look at this through a modern psychological lens, it maps perfectly onto our understanding of cognitive behavioral therapy and the concept of intrusive thoughts. The sudden, irrational urge to do something destructive, or the quiet voice whispering that you aren't good enough, or that you should take revenge.
The parallel is striking. Contrast the intimacy of the Quran with broader concepts of demonic activity. In medieval Christianity, demonic affliction was often viewed as an external siege, a demon oppressing a village or possessing an individual in a dramatic, visible display.
Like The Exorcist.
Right? Or in ancient Zoroastrianism, the devas were cosmic entities who freely chose the lie over the truth, and humans were caught in the crossfire of this macro-level war.
Big cosmic battles.
Yes. But the Quran, however, makes the battle infinitesimally small and intensely personal. It is not a dramatic war fought with swords in the clouds. It is a quiet, localized, daily skirmish occurring entirely within the confines of your own mind.
But I have to bring up a significant concern regarding how these concepts were historically applied. During the Middle Ages, the Church and various inquisitors used those demonic classifications we discussed to literally medicalize and diagnose spiritual failings.
They did, yes.
If a peasant was exhausted and refused to work the fields, a priest wouldn't diagnose them with depression or malnutrition. They would assert the peasant was under the influence of Astaroth, the demon of sloth. If someone was whispering gossip to their neighbor during Mass, it was attributed to the minor demon Belias provoking them.
It was a system that provided an immediate supernatural diagnosis for complex social and psychological behaviors.
Right, but doesn't this entire framework, blaming a specific demon for your gossip or your greed or your lust, ultimately let human beings completely off the hook?
How do you mean?
Well, if I embezzle money and I claim Mammon deceived me, or if I ruin my life gambling and say Asmodeus compelled me, aren't I just utilizing a supernatural excuse to avoid accountability for my own bad decisions?
That is a crucial modern critique. But if we rigorously analyze the theology within these source texts, the answer is a resounding no.
Oh, really?
The framework absolutely does not absolve the individual. In almost all of these major traditions, Christian, Jewish, and Islamic, there is a strict theological limitation placed upon demonic power.
Which is?
Demons, regardless of their rank or terrifying appearance, possess zero physical agency over the human will. They cannot force a human being to execute an action. They cannot overwrite human autonomy.
So all the roaring and the fire and the three heads, it's all just intimidation. They are ultimately powerless to move your hand.
They possess only the power of suggestion. They can only tempt. They can present the illusion of happiness. They can highlight the shortcut to wealth. They can amplify the dark desire that already exists within you. But the ultimate decisive battleground is, and always have been, human free will.
The requirement of consent.
Exactly. If you spread a vicious rumor, the demon Belias may have planted the initial seed of the thought, but you made the conscious choice to open your mouth and speak. If you succumb to systemic greed, Mammon may have eliminated the gold, but you utilized your free will to reach out and take it.
That is a staggering realization. They are entirely dependent on our consent. They are merely the facilitators of our own worst instincts.
Demons, when viewed through this analytical lens, are not the architects of our destruction. They are mirrors. They are
Years.
reflective surfaces exposing what we fear most about ourselves, our profound, terrifying capacity for corruption. They expose the fragility of our morals when placed under pressure. They are the externalized architecture of our own capacity to choose the lie over the truth.
That reframes how we must engage with every single one of these ancient texts. They aren't just superstitious ghost stories told around a fire to scare children. They are the earliest forms of diagnostic psychology. They are complex manuals dissecting human weakness, identifying the specific pressure points where a society or an individual is most likely to fracture.
Which perfectly explains the enduring relevance of these myths across millennia. Human societies have largely ceased believing in localized thunder deities or spirits of the harvest, yet we continue to produce endless literature, theology, and media concerning demonic temptation, possession, and the architecture of hell.
Why do you think that is?
Because the fundamental human struggle against the gravitational pull of pride, the corrosive nature of greed, and the destructive capacity of lust has not fundamentally changed in 5,000 years. The demons endure because our flaws endure.
To bring this entire exploration full circle back to our starting point, we began by asking you to imagine standing in the dark, feeling the primal fear of what might be lurking in the shadows with you. Over the course of this deep dive, we've illuminated those shadows.
We have.
We've mapped the tragic descent of the Watchers falling on Mount Hermon and analyzed the anti-imperialist warnings embedded in their teachings. We've descended through the 7 terrifying, mathematically precise levels of Jahannam and unpacked the bizarre, highly specific bureaucracy of the Ars Goetia. We have observed how the concept of angels represents order, divine purpose, and the rigid, unbreakable laws governing the universe.
And conversely, we have established that demons represent the forces of entropy. They embody chaos, temptation, and the untamed, deeply destructive parts of human nature that we desperately struggle to suppress and control. They are the personification of the decay that constantly threatens the stability of every human life and every human society.
So as we conclude, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, provocative thought to mull over. We've spent an hour dissecting ancient monsters, bottomless pits, and the origin stories of fallen stars. We've discussed entities bound in subterranean prisons and the wandering spirits of cannibal giants. But if demons are truly born from the architecture of our own pride, our own insatiable lust, and our own systemic greed, perhaps the most terrifying demons aren't the ones chained in the dark, ancient valleys of the earth. Perhaps the absolute most dangerous demons are the ones we unknowingly invite into our daily lives, giving them a seat at our table every single time we stop paying attention to our own moral compass.
A sobering and ultimately essential realization for anyone seeking to understand the human condition.
To everyone supporting GL Deep Dives, thank you for being part of this exploration. If you're enjoying the show, make sure to follow and subscribe and stay on the journey.